we're ever ready to say goodbye to people we love, but there is a particular cruelty that many of you have expressed to me about just how overwhelmingly quickly the news came, first of Sandra's illness and then our losing her. But we are here today to honor her life, and apparently she planned most of this ceremony with instructions that it should be full of laughter and celebration of her spirit. So I'm going to start liturgically with words from chapter 31 of Proverbs, the paean to the valiant woman, which in some traditional households is sung by a husband to a wife every Friday evening at Shabbat. But as I sang and translated some of it for the family the last full day of Sandra's life, the response was, this was written for Sandra. So we'll sing and translate a little of it for you now. אשת חיל מימצא ורחוק מפנינים מיכה, בוטח בלב בעלה ושאלה לא יחסר, גמלת הוא טוב ולא רע, כל ימי חייה דרשת צמר ופשתים וטס וחפץ כפיה. הייתה כאוניות סוחר, ממרחק תביא לחמה, ותקום בעוד לילה, ותיתן טרף לביתה וחוק לנערותיה, זמם השדה ותיקחהו, מפרי כפיה נטע כרם, חוגרה ועוז מותניה, ותם מצרותיה. פיה פותחה בחוכמה, ותורת חסד על לישונה, צופיה הליכות ביתה, ולחם עצלות לא תאכל. קמו בניה וישרוה, בעלה ויהללה, רבות בנות עשו חיל, ואת עלית על כולנה. שקר החן והבל היופי, אישה יראת אדוני, היא תתהלל תנולה, מפרי ידיה ויהללוה, בשערים מעשיה. A woman of valor who can find? Her worth is far beyond that of rubies. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. She's good to him and never bad all the days of her life. She looks for wool and flax and sets her hand to them with the wool. She is like a merchant fleet bringing food from afar. She rises while it is still night and supplies provisions for her household and the daily fare of her maids. She sets her mind on an estate and acquires it. She plants a vineyard by her own labors. She girds herself with strength and performs her task with vigor. Her mouth is full of wisdom, her tongue with kindly teaching. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children declare her happy. Her husband praises her. Many women have done well, but you surpass them all. Grace is deceptive, beauty is illusory, but a woman who fears the Lord, that woman is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hand and let her works praise her in the gates. And as many of you know, Sandra always shied away from any sort of spotlight, didn't want to receive praise. Whenever she was honored, would deflect the praise to everybody else involved in any venture. And so I think she really would have resonated with that line, let her works speak for themselves. But it won't just be her works that speak for themselves today. We'll let her progeny speak for her.
Everyone whose life Sandra touched. So I'm David, I'm Sandra's son. I want to thank you all for coming. Okay, this is going to be tough. It means a lot for my family to see such an incredible outpouring of love and support for such an incredible person as my mom. When Sandra first received the news of her diagnosis, can everyone hear me okay? Okay. When Sandra first received the news of her diagnosis, rather than getting down, she went into planning mode. Probably not a huge surprise to most of you. She ghost wrote her obituary, she started planning her own Shiva, and of course, she decided to plan the details of today. After all, people could not be hungry, so naturally we must discuss how we would have food for Shiva and or the synagogue. There'd be people coming to the house to sit Shiva, probably many people, so she gave my dad instructions, getting the skylights clean, where to find chairs, to make sure the house was properly landscaped. She didn't discuss many of these details with me. However, Sandra did ask me specifically whether I would eulogize her. Actually, in her words, would I MC? Sandra asked me to speak about her, but to make sure there was plenty of humor. Sandra told me there had to be laughter. And one of the last conversations I had with her, she told me it was time to get the shtick ready. It may seem ironic on a day like this, but this was the real spirit of Sandra. After all, Sandra had a reputation to keep up. No event with Sandra's name attached to it could leave anyone feeling hungry, dissatisfied, unfulfilled, or thoroughly entertained. So that's what I hope I can do. I'd like to spend a few minutes trying to capture the true essence of Sandra and somehow make sure that everyone leaves satisfied, all along making sure that people laugh at the saddest of occasions. No pressure. As many of us know, it's hard to say no to Sandra. So here goes. Sandra was born on March 7th, 1943. When Sandra was 1, her family moved to a middle-class neighborhood in Brookline, Massachusetts, where she grew up. Sandra's father, my grandpa Harry, we'll talk about him in a little while, owned a shoe store in Chelsea. Sandra attended Runkle School in Brookline through 8th grade, and then Brookline High School, where she graduated in 1960. Unfortunately, my grandpa Harry didn't really believe that young women needed much college. Rather, young women should focus on a practical education. I always believed that in a different era, Sandra would have been destined for medical school, but Sandra enrolled in the Forsyth School of Dental Hygiene. As we all know, Sandra made the most of whatever she had and was an overachiever with everything she touched. Sandra worked as a clinical dental hygienist in the Boston area, but worked on the side taking classes first at Boston University and then eventually transferring to complete her bachelor's degree at Northeastern. When Jean accepted a position at Bucknell in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, Sandra was still home with me. Sandra did some research in Lewisburg and made contact with the best dentist in the area. In 1971, the school district was looking for a dental hygienist to work in the school district. They asked around for recommendations, and soon they were literally knocking on Sandra's door. Sandra ended up getting hired as the dental hygienist for the school district. She was responsible for 4 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and the local high school. She was responsible for doing dental health screenings and taught classes on dental health. This experience got Sandra very interested in education, so during this time she started working towards her master's in education at Bucknell. In the late 70s, as Sandra completed her master's degree, she was approached by a local community college, asking if she would sit on the board of their health program. The community college already had good health programs, but was now planning to start a dental hygiene program. They knew Sandra would be a unique addition to their board. One of Sandra's first responsibilities was to establish a dental hygiene program and to hire a director for the program. Sandra didn't apply for the position, but the board recruited her and she was offered the job on the spot. After about 3 years, she was then asked to be the director of all health programs at the school. Overachiever. However, when Jean accepted a position at the University of Oregon in 1983, Sandra left that position behind to move to Eugene. In Eugene, Sandra went back to school and reinvented herself as an elementary school teacher. From all indications, and coming as a surprise to no one, she was unbelievable in the classroom as well. I asked Sandra's longtime colleague and close friend Kathy, hi Kathy, what Sandra was really like in the classroom. Kathy described how Sandra would always consider each child, individualize the child in order to get the most out of them. This was a challenge in a school where sadly many of the kids did not get the educational instruction and reinforcement they needed at home. Sandra always created the kind of environment that every kid needed to learn. Kathy did recall for me one story. This one made me laugh, so I wanted to share. There was one boy in Sandra's class one year who every time he went out of the playground, he cracked out every curse word in the book. As hard as the aides on the playground tried, they could not control or discipline this kid. So Sandra decided on an approach, a unique one. I don't think even Jean knows this story. Okay, Kathy told me Jean might not know this story, so this is fun. She pulled the boy into the classroom after she sent all the other kids out on the playground. She closed the door, and she proceeded to tell him, at Bratton Elementary, we do not use the following words. I won't share them now. I think that would be a little bit inappropriate, but suffice it to say that Sandra laid off every curse word that she knew. And as Kathy told it, she did rattle off everything she knew. The kid was so surprised, he never cursed on the playground again. I'm not suggesting there's any lesson in that, I'm just saying. Sandra retired from teaching in 2001. However, as we all know, when Sandra retired, it was as if Sandra's real job began. Sandra was a professional volunteer. In fact, as volunteers go, Sandra was the chairwoman of the board. From 3,000 miles away, I always got the sense that Sandra would look for as many volunteer activities as she could to contribute her time and, of course, her talents. For example, sometime around 2005, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was around 2005, my parents came to visit my family in North Carolina over winter break. We took my parents to an event in our Jewish community which takes place on Christmas Day every year. It was called Mitzvah Day. This was an opportunity for the Jewish community in the Chapel Hill, Durham area to come together first for a community breakfast and then break off into small groups to volunteer in the community. Different groups would go clean local parks, sing Christmas carols at senior homes, make meals for police or firefighters, even make dog toys for the local pet shelters. And for those wondering, everyone does still go out for Chinese food when this is over. So rest assured, keep our values. I have this memory of walking my parents around during the breakfast. Normally Sandra would be trying to meet as many people as possible, but instead I noticed that Sandra started studying everything that was going on, as if she was trying to reverse engineer how the whole thing was organized. Most people would be overwhelmed by the organized chaos, but not Sandra. After about an hour, she turned to Jean and she said, I'm going to do this back in Eugene. And as I recall, Jean had the perfect supportive Jean reaction, and we heard a lot of these. I wouldn't doubt you. Many of you know what came next. Sandra co-created Mitzvah Day in Eugene. 20 activities, hundreds of volunteers, and of course, Sandra going to area businesses, asking people for donations to feed the volunteers or to help those in need. After all, everyone wanted to be nice. That was something that Sandra would say, and she really believed it. That would be enough for most people, but that's just one example of Sandra's boundless energy. There are many more. Years ago, Sandra noticed on a Sunday morning that parents would come to drop their kids off at Hebrew school here and would sit around the lobby, I presume enjoying the Wi-Fi and probably getting work done. That would be enough for me. I guess in Sandra's eyes, they must have looked bored, hungry, something, maybe both. So Sandra started Sunday Cafe. She started making coffee, buying bagels, and then would start baking various coffee cakes every Sunday of the school year to sell. It was a chance for parents to have a little nosh, but also create a more social environment. Again, everyone really just wanted to be nice. I don't tell this story about Mitzvah Day or Sunday Cafe because these were the only things that Sandra did. Quite the contrary. These are only a couple of examples of Sandra using her personality, organizational skills, and energy to pull off something that I really think very few people in this world could pull off. I remember when I mentioned to my sister-in-law, Nomi, about Sandra's diagnosis. Nomi used a word that's really stuck with me. Sandra was unstoppable. And she truly was unstoppable. Years ago, when my niece Hannah, where are you, Hannah, was in the first grade, Sandra started volunteering every Wednesday in Hannah's class. When Hannah aged out of elementary school, Sandra kept volunteering, but now in Nate's class. Everyone loved when Sandra came in. The kids, the teachers, the administration. The teachers would give her various projects, and of course, Sandra excelled. On top of that, Sandra was able to do some mentoring for younger teachers. Never critical of teachers, but always able to help. Sandra was the perfect teacher in so many ways, and on top of that, the perfect mentor. As with everything that Sandra touched, her deep love of commitment never wavered. Even when Sandra had breast cancer and was going through radiation, she would do her radiation in the morning and then go to school in the afternoon. Unstoppable. Sorry. Her time volunteering only stopped this past winter break when she got sick. Sandra wasn't just successful because she worked hard and was organized, though admittedly, I can't think of anyone who worked harder or was more organized. Sandra had a certain way of making everyone feel comfortable and a smile that would just light up the room. She was the ultimate positive spirit. Sandra was the type of person that when she met people, people opened up. She made everyone feel comfortable. I was amazed over the month of Karen posting to the Karen Bridge site how many people posted stories of Sandra welcoming them to town, welcoming them into the community, or welcoming to town. Everyone loved talking to Sandra, and Sandra made everyone feel good. Everyone. Here's a classic example, or really several examples. Sandra and Jean traveled a couple of times a year to visit my family in North Carolina. There were few guarantees whenever Sandra got off the plane. First, it was a guarantee that Sandra came off the flight knowing the life story of the person sitting next to her. I'm not talking about Jean, I'm talking about the person on the other side. The other guarantee is that we would always get in the car to drive home, and Sandra would always start with, "I met the most interesting person on the plane." However, the funnier part to me was that it was a guarantee that Sandra would always feel the need to defend herself. "I promise you, David, he or she just started talking to me." Incredulous, I would always look at Jean, who said, "No, it's true. He or she did just start talking to Sandra." That was Sandra. Everyone felt an instant connection to her, and she made everyone feel comfortable. For me, it's hard to talk too much about Sandra without talking about Sandra and Jean. Sometime in late May, early June of 1961, Jean was just finishing his first year of graduate school at MIT. Jean's oldest, dearest high school friend, Marty Itzkowitz, was already married at this point? Okay, was already married to Anne, or at least, right, so they were already married. Anne wanted to fix up Jean with an old camp friend of hers. So with nothing to lose, Jean took the number of Anne's friend, Harriet. Well, you didn't really think it would be Sandra, did you? That wouldn't be that interesting of a story. But Jean called Harriet, who informed her that she had recently gotten engaged. Great fix-up. Harriet told Jean that she had a friend who would love to go out with him. So Jean took the number of Harriet's friend, Joni. Again, it would be too easy if it were Sandra. Jean called Joni, but unfortunately Joni was sick. So thank goodness Jean is persistent. Joni told Jean that she had a friend and gave her the number for her friend, Sandra Paretsky. Thankfully, Jean was determined. Jean called Sandra, and on June 10th, 1961, nearly 58 years ago, Jean and Sandra had their first date. Jean recalls, well, because Jean never forgets, that they went on a drive-in on their first date. Real smooth. Jean also said it was a double feature. He recalls the first movie was Can Can, starring Frank Sinatra, and he doesn't remember what the second movie was. I'm sorry if that seems like too much information, but Sandra asked for humor. After their first date, Sandra, who was 18, told her friends that she went on a date with the man she was going to marry. They were always together after that point. Jean and Sandra were married on June 14th, 1964, 55 years ago this year. There's a Yiddish term, bashert, which is used to mean one's soulmate, but it really means destiny. If there was ever a couple that embodied this, it was Sandra and Jean. They were the perfect partnership, the perfect couple. Sorry, I'm good. They complemented each other. They're the role models for the perfect marriage, and they were truly inseparable. They weren't always the perfect partnership. To me, this was in part in the support they showed for each other. But amazingly, they both always credited the other. In fact, I've heard Jean say, only recently, that when we moved to Eugene, and Jean came in as the chairman of the Computer and Information Science Department at the U of O, Sandra was the real reason he was successful. Jean says he admitted that he kept responsibility for his research, thankfully, but it was Sandra that helped keep the department together and keep the morale high. Of course, just because Jean and Sandra were so perfect and so inseparable does not mean that they were always on the same schedule. Quite the contrary. Many people know that Sandra was up at 4 o'clock, maybe 4:30 on most days. And not just in her later years. No, this is true. This is not an exaggeration for the purposes. This is true. This is the way Sandra always operated. I remembered in my teen years that if I slept until 9 o'clock on the weekends, I would wake up, and by the way, this was before Karen or Jean woke up. I would wake up and Sandra would always comment, half the day was gone already. At 9 o'clock. Of course, Jean could take this to the extreme. When Jean was deep in his research, he would go to bed at 2, maybe 3 a.m. and sleep until late morning. Many people knowing Sandra would not be surprised to hear that there were several occasions that Jean woke up to go to the bathroom, say anytime between 7 and 10, and by the time he came back to bed, the bed was made. It's an old joke I've heard a lot of people tell, but this happened not once or twice, but multiple times to my parents. And it's really because Sandra never stopped. Anybody who has ever been to our house or just knows Sandra knows that Sandra's house is always spotless. Everything was always in its place and every drawer closed. And the floor was so clean that you could eat off of them. Although to be clear, Sandra would never allow that. And yet, Sandra had a cleaning person at the house every Thursday morning. I'm sure I'm not the only one who knew Sandra who wondered why she bothered having a cleaning person. And Sandra was that person who cleaned the house before the cleaning person just to make sure the cleaning person had a chance to get the house really clean. In recent years, Sandra turned the Thursday cleaning into an event. Sandra would wake Jean, and every Thursday they went out to breakfast. And as both of them used to brag to me, they would hold hands at breakfast, sitting across the table. What could be a bigger high for Sandra? Sitting and enjoying some nice breakfast, holding hands with my dad, all the while knowing that the house was being cleaned. Sandra and Jean also complemented each other's weaknesses with their own strengths. For example, Jean recently had a trip to D.C., in fact, to grade the Putnam exam, the hardest mathematics exam for undergraduates. When Sandra was helping Jean pack, she didn't help just Jean to pick out the clothes, but she laid out matching outfits from what he packed and made him take pictures on his phone so he knew what would go together. Of course, Sandra was the ultimate planner. I'm sure Jean was the best dressed of all the mathematicians in the room. Now, I want to be clear, best dressed mathematician is a very low bar, but that's not really the point of the story. I would be remiss if I did not mention how truly wonderful Sandra was as a mother. Sandra was always there when you needed her and knew how to find a way to not be there when you felt like you didn't need her. Sandra was more than a mom. She was a good friend. Many people don't know how it was that we came to call her Sandra, but it embodies so much of Sandra and her spirit. As we all know, Sandra was the ultimate entertainer. For friends, for colleagues, for relatives, doesn't matter. In fact, when Karen was about 11 or 12, and Sandra and Jean were hosting a party, Karen called out, "Mom, Mom, Mom," and got no response. So Karen said, "Sandra," and my mom turned around. Clearly, my mom was attuned to people saying Sandra because it must mean that one of her guests needed something. After that, Sandra tried to get Karen to stop calling her Sandra, but Karen couldn't stop. Once I started, I think Sandra gave up. But later, Sandra embraced it. I remember some time later, I overheard another friend's mom coming by to pick up her kid from a play date. My friend's mom said, "Sandra, why do you let David call you by your first name?" Sandra, without missing a beat, responded, "David calls all of his friends by their first name." I know that one of Karen's favorite Sandra stories happened around the same time. Karen was in a stage, which I of course followed as a good younger brother, where everything sucks. This homework sucks, this chicken sucks, this television show sucks. Sandra, in a rare weak moment, maybe she should have just pulled you in and said, "We don't say the following words in this house," but she didn't do that. She didn't do that, not what the script says. Sandra, in a rare weak moment, made the mistake of suggesting to Karen that she did not want to hear her using the phrase sucks, unless it was associated with lollipops. Of course, you know how that one backfired. This homework sucks lollipops. This chicken sucks lollipops. This television show sucks lollipops. I think Sandra may have given up on vocabulary correction after that. As long as I'm cranking out the bad language stories, let me try one more. I remember when I was in second grade, I was at my friend Eric's house. I'm not sure what the circumstances were, but I must have said "damn it" in earshot of Eric's mom. Eric's mom was horrified. She threatened to wash my mouth out with soap. Thankfully, soon after, Sandra showed up at the house. Eric's mom answered the door, but still shaken from the scolding, I was right behind her, anxious to see Sandra. Is that comforting? Sandra had a way of making everyone feel better in the most awkward situation. Eric's mom opened the door and said, "Sandra, I have to tell you that your son said a bad word in our house." Sandra said, "Oh, really? What did he say?" Eric's mom replied, "He said, 'damn it.'" Sandra, again, without missing a beat, "Oh, that's not a bad word in our house." I don't think I could ever have the words to truly describe an incredible person my mom is, or what she means to me, or certainly what she means to so many people here. When I called one of my closest friends to tell him my sad news, his response was so touching to me. He said, Sandra was everyone's favorite mother. But then he paused and he said, no, Sandra was everyone's mother. Sandra led by example, and what an example she was. If everyone in this world spent half the time that Sandra did trying to make other people happy, I really think this world would be an unbelievable place. Thank you, Sandra, for showing us the way. Finally, I want to make special mention of Sandra's beloved grandchildren, Adina, Hannah, Sivan, and Nate. That's just age order, okay? Okay. I would challenge anyone to find a grandmother who was prouder or more supportive of her incredible grandchildren, even though they aren't that great. Once, okay, they're great. Once, when Hannah was about 4, she asked Sandra, will you still love me when you die? Okay, hang on. Yeah. To Hannah, Adina, Sivan, and Nate, let me assure you, the answer is definitely yes. Grandma Sandra's love will always surround you, and may you always feel her wonderfully positive spirit. There is a story in the family that some of you may have heard us tell. When Sandra first enrolled in the Forsyth School of Dental Hygiene, she went with my Grandpa Harry to pay her tuition bill. My Grandpa Harry didn't like writing checks, so he went to pay her tuition bill in cash. As a parent of a college student, this always sounded particularly funny to me. I picture parents standing at the registrar paying tuition, $24,320, $24,340. I know, a different time. Anyway, as the registrar took the money, she said to my Grandpa Harry, your daughter is very lucky to be going here. Without missing a beat, Harry responded, you are very lucky to have her. And isn't that the way Sandra made everyone feel? Sandra, Mom, we love you. We were all lucky to have had you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sandra was such an incredible Jewish mother to so many. It's very appropriate. She asked her friend Liz Siegel to prepare to sing for her today. And Liz is going to be singing a Yiddish Mama, a Jewish mother, with Lydia Lord on piano.
Can you hear me? Excuse me. A month or so ago, I got a telephone call from Karen, and she said, Mama wants to talk to you. So she put Sandra on the phone, and I was so thrilled because we hadn't been able to see her personally. So to be able to talk to her on the phone was very special to me. And so Sandra gets on the phone, and she said, would you do something for me? And I said, gosh, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. And I said, what is it? She said, would you sing at my memorial? And gosh, I thought, that's going to be many months from now. And so I said, yes, I would, not knowing that it would be so soon. Sandra was very dear to me. I have to say one thing. When she put her arms around me, she was bigger than me, and it felt like it was my own mother, reincarnation. It was a warm, loving hug, and I'll never forget that. So I'm going to sing a song. Maybe is a little sad, but this is what we came up with. So the song, Yiddish Mama, a Jewish mother, there's nothing better in the world. How sad it is when she is ill. How light it is in the house when the mama's there. And how sad it is when God takes her up to heaven. She would run to help her children, not only her children, but in my case, she was, if I needed her, she was always there. How lucky, not to hold her dear is the worst sin. How lucky and rich are we to have a really wonderful gift from God. Sandra was a true Yiddish mama. So to my dear Sandra, I'm going to sing this song, and I hope I can get through it. Jüdische Mama, es ist nicht besser in der Welt. A jüdische Mama, oi, wie bitter, wenn sie fällt. Wie schön und lichtig ist in Haus, wenn die Mamas da. Wie traurig finster wird, wenn Gott nimmt auf allem ab. In Wasser und Feuer sollt sie geläufen, Pfarrer Kind. Nicht halten Teil, das ist gewiss der größte Sinn. Oi, wie glücklich und reich ist der Mensch, was hat als schöne Matone geschenkt von Gott. Nur ein altische, jüdische Mama. Oi, Mama, mein.
Thank you, Liz and Lydia. I invite Phyllis Bobrow, who worked very closely with Sandra in the sisterhood, to come and share. I understand not only your own reflections, but reflections of many of Sandra's friends who had the honor of working with her.
Hard acts to follow. I was going to entitle this, If Little Jewish Girls Could Be Nominated for Sainthood, but then I thought it might be inappropriate in this shul. I'm Phyllis. Sandra was one of my first friends when I moved to Eugene. Our common history as teachers, moms, grandmoms formed the basis for an instant bond. I've been honored to work with Sandra on countless sisterhood and community events and projects for more than a decade. I was part of the communication conduit during her illness. So many of Sandra's enormous fan club members have shared their thoughts about her with me. The list of adjectives they used to describe her attributes was almost identical, which is probably no surprise to anyone who knew her. Kind, loving, caring, welcoming, inclusive, gracious, emissa balabosta, and all that while almost always being chipper and upbeat. Sandra valued family above all else. Again, no surprise to those who knew her. She joyously shared about her offspring's accomplishments and genuinely delighted to hear about others' families, especially the children. She was amazingly organized and valued efficiency. She joked that she knew where every toothpick was in her kitchen. A doer, early to bed, early to rise, a planner for whom follow through on commitments mattered enormously. It was a great compliment when Sandra said, "I can always count on you." Sandra could make friends with a rock. She was a terrific saleswoman, which we both thought was another word for teacher. Though led by compassion, she was also a firm believer in the law of natural consequences, the concept that to a large degree, what we do affects what happens to us. If folks don't bring enough food to a potluck, they'll have less to eat and will likely behave differently next time. Sandra adopted TBI's kitchen as her own. She organized and maintained and grew it over time. In honor of that dedication and commitment, Sisterhood has commissioned a plaque to be created in glass mosaic, which will be placed prominently in TBI's kitchen, saying, "Sandra's Kitchen, love served here." Through the pain of the last couple of months, I never felt she was afraid. I was grateful for that. Certainly she wasn't happy with the diagnosis, but she accepted it with realism and grace. Honestly, Sandra spoke mostly about how truly blessed she felt her life had been. A friend asked what I thought Sandra might have chosen to be different in her life. I don't think that she would have changed much, if anything, because she made a habit of conscious good choices about her involvements and the people in her life. She chose her commitments carefully and then focused her planning and organizational talents for group success. She gloried in others' achievements above her own. Sandra encouraged the best in us by modeling those behaviors every day. She was a great leader because she was a great team player. On January 8th, the day before the biopsy, she had already made peace with the probabilities. She asked me to share the following note with our Sisterhood board members, and I'd like to share it with you as well. In her own words, "You have all been wonderful friends to know and work with, as well as an inspiration of what we can accomplish as a group and as individuals within that group. I hope I have provided leadership and guidance and given us a vision of what we can do when we work together. It is important to me that our reputation and tradition of support and community continue in the Jewish community and the greater community as well. Your efforts will be appreciated and offer comfort that is so needed at this time. So please continue in this work. You have a wonderful team and capable leadership. I love, respect, and care about all of you, and wish you only the very best. With love, Sandra."
Thank you, Phyllis. Miriam Ornstein, Sandra's daughter-in-law, is going to read Psalm 23 for us.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בינות דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי שובב, ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא אירא, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. A Psalm of David. The Eternal is my shepherd, I shall never be in need. Amidst the choicest grasses does God set me down. God leads me by the calmest waters and restores my soul. God takes me along paths of righteousness in keeping with the honor of God's name. Even should I wander in a valley of the darkest shadows, I will fear no evil. You are with me, God. Your power and support are there to comfort me. You set in front of me a table in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup is overflowing. Surely good and loving kindness will pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall come to dwell inside the house of the Eternal for a length of days.
Kosi rivaya, my cup overflows. That was generally Sandra's attitude. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here who was often hearing about the exploits and accomplishments of Sandra's grandchildren and how proud she was of them. So I think it's very appropriate that her granddaughter, Dina Ornstein-Lux, is going to share a few words.
Hi, I've already been introduced, but for those of you who don't know me again, my name's Adina. I'm Sandra's oldest, I was Sandra's oldest grandchild. So as my dad might say, I was the first one she got to brag about. I want to start by observing the sheer amount of people that are here right now. I mean, just take a second and say wow to yourself. Observe the people who are sitting next to you or behind you. The feeling of love in this space is almost tangible. That is incredible. I hope you all feel this warmth deep in your heart as we sit here today, together, bound by the love for my wonderful grandmother, Sandra. I think the presence of you all here today is a visual representation of the impact my grandmother had on so many. I feel moved to speak here because I believe my grandma Sandra has deeply touched aspects of our lives. My hope is that we never forget that. I think our collective duty is to carry on the spirit of my grandmother Sandra. She was a remarkable person. She changed my life in the most amazing way, and for that I cannot thank her enough. By watching my grandmother live these past 18 years, I feel that I have observed the most incredible outlook on life. I wish to share some of her outlook today with you in hopes that we can all live as beautifully as my grandmother did. And I know that some people have already reflected on the amazing way that she thought about life, but what I would like to do is I tried to pick 10 of these principles to speak about so we can all try to follow them just as she did. Number 1, embody joy in all aspects of your life. Whether it be at the grocery store or with your family, always, always, always strive to be joyful. Grandma Sandra taught us all that when one person is joyful, it lights up an entire room. I think many of us have already learned this lesson from her. I challenge you to all carry out this joy, even in the hardest of times. 2, see the best in all people. Back in 2016, when I was interviewing Grandma Sandra about her life for a family history project I had to do for school, I asked her a few questions about her life, and she responded to me, quote, "I make friends with anybody." End quote. I think we all know that to be true. She really was the ultimate friend maker. I think deep down, Grandma Sandra had the truest appreciation for the beauty in every person. We all must try to see the same goodness in all people. Using her skills, maybe we all can be the best friends there ever were. 3, lead with strength. Even in hard times, lead with strength. Grandma Sandra was a rock for so many people in her life. She was a natural leader, but in the most subtle way. I will always admire my grandmother for being such a strong, empowered woman. Her power and passion were iconic. She has taught us all how to lead while supporting everyone around us. We must all uphold that same level of strength and dedication. 4, quote, that's why there's always chocolate and vanilla, end quote. Okay, this one may seem a little bit confusing at first, but what Grandma Sandra meant by it is that we do not all have to agree on everything. That is why there's chocolate and vanilla. The idea is sort of agree to disagree, but in the most peaceful way. For many of us, my Grandma Sandra has been a peacemaker, always knowing how to solve a complex problem, always accepting that sometimes a disagreement is healthy. Only someone who is so level-headed can be willing to accept that ultimately peace is more important than someone being right or wrong. 5, acceptance. This one is simple. Grandma Sandra accepted everyone she knew, whoever they were and wherever they were. I have never seen anyone do this to the level that she did. We can all learn something from this utmost acceptance. 6, community grounds you and gives you life. This one is a big one. For my Grandma Sandra, community was so important. Wherever she went, she managed to find and build community. She made everyone feel at home and created a space for her to thrive as well. Her Jewish community here and her friend in the sisterhood were unparalleled. She has taught us that we can do nothing without a strong, supportive community. Community is integral to individual success. Somehow, my Grandma Sandra even managed to build community in North Carolina where I live. She's just that amazing. She was a catalyst for community building. As a young leader, I am forever indebted to the skills she has taught me in that regard. 7, family goes beyond those who are related to you. Don't get me wrong, Grandma Sandra loved her family. However, she also loved everyone else. Family is everyone who she spoke to. This motto is simply remarkable. 8, the glass is always half full. I know we've all heard that expression, but Grandma Sandra lived it out in literally a way that I've never seen anyone else do. For those of you who knew my grandmother at all, you know of her beaming, positive attitude. She was always positive. I mean, always. Grandma Sandra's optimism and positivity was a gift. If we can even begin to be this optimistic, we can change our very outlook on life. 9, stay motivated. Somehow, amongst all of this joy spreading, Grandma Sandra managed to stay motivated on school or on her life. She taught others to do the same, giving room for Grandpa Jean or herself to focus on work. She never let that motivation to do better dull. She was a powerhouse. 10, love. Most importantly, Grandma Sandra taught us love. Grandma Sandra, unlike any other person I know, mastered how to give love. She spread love as if it was gospel and spread it to everyone she knew. I'm sure you all have felt that warmth of my grandmother's love. I hope you all are able to feel that warmth forever and are able to give that same warmth to others. I challenge you to attempt to follow these principles. I know it is hard, and I've never seen anyone follow these as eloquently as my grandmother. With love and support from each other, we can learn to live as beautifully as Grandma Sandra did. I think we owe that to her. Lastly, please let the spirit of my grandmother guide you. As I learned from the musical Lion King in a song following the passing of Simba's father, the song is entitled, He Lives in You. Remember that with Grandma Sandra. She lives in you. I know this may sound corny, but I wholeheartedly believe that Grandma Sandra lives in all of us. I mean, look at her husband, my Grandpa Jean. He's amazing. Look at her kids, my Aunt Karen and my dad David, also outstanding. Look at my cousins, her other grandchildren. We know what Grandma Sandra thought of them. She lives in every single person in this room, in the way we interact with each other, in the way we go to our place of worship and pray, in the way we study for exams in school, in the way we smile and thank people who do random acts of kindness. Grandma Sandra lives in us. This to me is so comforting. She has taught us so much, and we must ooze love and kindness just as she did. I cannot help but smile when I say these words. Each of us has an inner light illuminated by the remarkable life of my Grandma Sandra. Don't let that light dim. Use her spirit to help it shine. If we all do this work together, if we all follow the principles she has taught me, I genuinely believe the world will be a better place. In such turbulent times in the world around us, we must hone in on the life of my grandmother. She has taught us to see things with love and beauty. With her help, we can know that everything is going to be all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina. I'm thinking of all the instructions we have about our kosher policy and Friday night setup in the kitchen just typed up on pieces of paper. And Phyllis, maybe under the plaque, we should have a typed instruction of the 10 principles of how to be like Sandra. We'll say the traditional prayers for the dead now. I invite Sandra's immediate family, her sister, her husband, her children, her nephew, to stand. And since Adina just reminded us that family goes beyond those who are related to you, I invite you all to stand in support, if you are able. As I sing El Malei Rachamim, and then we'll go into Mourner's Kaddish. El Malei Rachamim, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמת זלדה בת צבי הרש וגולדה, שהלכה לעולמה. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתיריה בסתר כנפיה לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen. God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah, amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, illuminating like the brilliance of the skies. The soul of Sandra Paretsky-Lux, Zelda Batzvi Hirsch Vigolda, who has gone to her eternal place of rest. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter her beneath your wings eternally and bind her soul among the living, that she may rest in peace. And we say, Amen. Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemera. Amen. Ve'alma tivrach hirute v'yamlich malchute. V'chayechon u'vyomechon v'chayei t'chol beit Yisrael. V'gala u'bizman kariv. Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach leolam u'leomei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha, brichu, le'ela, min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael b'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen. You may be seated. We will have one more closing song. I'll invite any of you who know it to sing along with me, Wings of Peace. And then you will all be welcome to stay because, as Sandra insisted, if there's going to be an event in her honor, everyone should be well fed. So there'll be a light luncheon available in the back of the social hall. So please do stay and share more stories of Sandra and more of her wisdom with each other. And there are 2 more nights of Shiva at Jean's home, this evening at 7 p.m. and Saturday evening at 7 p.m. And the family will be here tomorrow evening for services in Kaddish. Thank you all for being here to honor her memory and to support the family. Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shalom, spread over us wings of peace. Shalom. Draw water in joy from the living well. Draw water in joy from the living well. Mayim Chaim, waters of life. Shalom. Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shalom, spread over us wings of peace. Shalom. Draw water in joy from the living well. Draw water in joy from the living well. Mayim Chaim, waters of life. Shalom.